Just a quick reminder of what we're going to be creating. So we're going to be designing something in Figma that looks something like this. We're also going to make it an interactive component just so we can learn that process of how to actually create animations for components within Figma that we can then use throughout our designs. But then we're going to take that into Adobe After Effects and we're going to be creating an animation like this really liquid toggle. This is actually two animations. So we've got an on animation and then we've got an off animation. So it's transitioning from the default state to the enabled state and then the enabled state to the default state. So when we export this as a Lottie file, we can either export it like this one big animation with the two kind of states involved, just to kind of demonstrate what we've got. But we could also just export this portion so that we've got an animation for enabling our toggle, and then we could also export this for disabling it. We can even look at things like doing a hover. So if I just open up this hover here, we could have a hover state. So when you're hovering over it, we could have this kind of liquid effect here. We'll look at this later in the tutorial series. For now, we're going to be focusing on creating the liquid toggle. So we're going to start today. This episode is going to be fully in Figma, and we're going to be creating a toggle that matches what we want to make in After Effects. So we're working a little bit backwards here, because usually you wouldn't have this already created in After Effects, but just for the sakes of this tutorial, we're going to be recreating this in Figma so that then we can use this as a reference for when we, in the next episode, come to create this in After Effects. In fact, it might not be the next episode. The next episode might be how we export from Figma into After Effects. And then the following episode will probably be animating in After Effects. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing we want to do when we're creating this is we want to pay kind of close attention to our toggle here. So this toggle button, or the handle, is actually, it's a circle. So it looks like a circle, it is a circle. But if we look over here on the left, it's actually a rectangle. And the reason we're creating it as a rectangle is so that we can manipulate it here, like this. But we might be able to do it as a circle still. There's a few options here. So what we want to be doing is looking at the shapes and what we can do with the Bezier curves. So let's just draw a circle real quick, or an ellipse. Here we go. And if we click in, we've actually got these handles where we can adjust things. And if we hold down the shift, we can manipulate both sides at the same time. And like so, we can both sides at the same time. So in this example that I created in another video that I'll hopefully remember to link to above, we did this from a rectangle. And the reason I did it from a rectangle when doing it inside here was because I wanted to create these shapes. And I'll show you just quickly what I did. I created a rectangle. Let's make it an even number, so it's 1 by 1. And then I had the radius, so it created a circle. So we've actually got a rectangle here. And if we click inside it, we don't have those handles that we have. But we can manipulate this shape still. But in this tutorial, we're actually going to be doing it from an ellipse, because we want to be doing it from these handles like this, which is how we're going to be doing it in After Effects. So even though previously, just to summarize, even though previously this was done using a rectangle, in this series we're going to be doing it as an ellipse. And the reason is so that we can have these smooth curves for creating our liquid UI and our liquid toggle. So let's get started. Whoops. Okay, there we go. So the first thing we want to create is this toggle background here. And if we click into one of these shapes here, we can see that it's 36 by 20. But let's make it a bit bigger so we've got something better to work with inside After Effects. So I'm going to times that by 10. So we're going to have 360 by 200. It's just a much bigger thing. As it's going to be a vector at the end, it doesn't matter what the size is, so long as the scale is, so long as like the portions are like correct. So we want to make sure that We could look at, for example, Apple's toggle and look at the width and height of that and make sure it's the same, but then we can scale it up, is the point I'm trying to make. So we can work with it a lot easier. So I'm going to create a new page here, and I'm going to create a rectangle. And just to go back quickly to have a look what size it was 36 by 20. So I'm going to times that by 10. Let's just close that. What was it? I've already forgotten. 36 by 20. So that would be 360, which I'm actually really close already, by 200. And then I'm going to lock that. So that is now our aspect ratio. So it's 360 by 200. We could even double that. So if we wanted to, we could times that by 2, and then we've got 720 by 400. In other words, what I'm saying is we're scaling it up, but we're keeping that aspect ratio the same. So we've got a nice big size to be working with in After Effects. But if we were to scale it down to 36, you can see it's 36 by 20. So that when we actually come to use it in the app, it is the right size. Okay, so let's have another look. So what we've got here on this toggle is we've got that 36 by 20 and we've got a nice round corner. Okay, so our height is 400. So our corners need to be half that, so 200. So there we go. Now we've got this toggle background. Let's name it toggle background, so we know what we're working with. Next, we want to be creating that toggle handle or button. And if I have a look here, just for reference, it's 16 by 16. So that would be 160 by 160. And then if you remembered, we doubled it again. So let's do 16 by 16 and lock it at that. We have an ellipse, that's correct. And then we can do 160 times 2. There we go, 320 by 320, perfect. And let's change that color to white. There we go, and now we've put it on, we've got a toggle build. So let's group that together and call that toggle. And then we're going to add a / and put default, because that is our default state. And we just need to make sure that we name this as well. I'm going to call this toggle handle. Okay, so let's duplicate that with a Command D, move it down, and let's make our enabled state. So we just need to move this to the other side, like so. And then we want to change our background color to something else. So you could play around with what you want to have your background color. I wouldn't suggest a red because that's usually associated with a warning or an error. So usually you would go with a kind of a green or a blue, depending what your brand colors are and what you want to do. For this example, we're going to go with, could go with a purple. Let's go with a purple because it's nice. It's a nice color.